I was brewing coffee when the phone rang. It was my only son, Mark. His voice was eerily calm as he said, "Mom, the lake house is now in my name. You signed the papers. Remember?" I froze, my heart nearly stopping, because I had never signed anything. 69 years of life, forging steel, building a home, and raising a son with everything I had, only for the son I trusted most to take it all away. I set the coffee cup down, looked at the lake reflecting the morning light, and gave a faint smile, because there was one thing Mark didn't know at all. My name is Evelyn Ellison. I'm 69 years old. After my husband Frank died of a stroke in the small workshop behind our house, I lived quietly in the home by Maple Lake, a place we built with our own hands, using steel, wood, and love. Frank used to say, "If forged right, metal will stand for a lifetime." I always believed that, until I realized human trust isn't as enduring as steel. My son, Mark, was my greatest pride. A young entrepreneur in renewable energy, full of ambition, intelligent, and hailed by the press as the face of a green future. I sold most of my assets, investing all my savings to help him start Helios Core. He once held my hand and said, "Mom, when I succeed, you won't have to worry about anything." And I believed in my son, his promises, our bond. Lately, Mark visited less often, always busy with meetings, flights, and investors. I grew used to the silence, the empty chair at the dinner table, and the workshop where only I remained. Until that morning, I was brewing coffee when the phone rang. A bank employee's voice came through. "We're calling to confirm the mortgage on the Maple Lake house, Mrs. Ellison." I froze. "Mortgage? I've never mortgaged anything." She spoke slowly. "According to our records, the paperwork was signed 3 weeks ago. Your son, Mr. Mark Ellison, was a co-signer." The coffee cup slipped from my hand, spilling across the table, spreading like a long, dark stain. I immediately called Mark. He answered, his voice calm. "Mom, you forgot again. You signed it 3 weeks ago." I explained it's just capital restructuring. "The house will be more useful as collateral," I said softly. "I never signed anything." Mark laughed. "You always told me to handle things. I'm just doing what's best for both of us." I fell silent. After the call ended, the house felt emptier than ever. The sunlight reflected off the steel walls in the workshop, so bright I had to squint. In that moment, I felt something break, a small, cold crack that couldn't be welded shut, and I knew my peace had been taken, along with the home I once called my haven. I couldn't sleep that night. The wind from Maple Lake whistled through the window cracks, sounding like metal clanging. I got up, opened the safe where I kept important documents. Everything was neatly filed in old folders, except for one thing missing, the deed to the house. I stared at the empty space, my heart icy. Frank once said, "When a bolt goes missing, it means someone unscrewed it." The next morning, I went to the bank. The branch manager, Mr. Donnelly, greeted me with a polite smile. "Mrs. Ellison, the loan paperwork is complete. We just need final confirmation," I said, my voice trembling with anger. "I never took out a loan. Someone forged my signature." He tilted his head, opened his computer. "Our system has everything: signature, fingerprint, and facial recognition video." I looked at the screen. A woman identical to me was signing papers. The face, the hair, the gestures, even the gloves I used in the workshop. I had never been there, but the video said otherwise. "That's not me," I whispered. Donnelly frowned. "Our authentication technology doesn't make mistakes. Besides, the paperwork was submitted by your son." I requested a copy of the contract. The signature was perfect. Every curve, every stroke, even the small ink dot where I usually pause my pen. But I noticed something odd. The timestamp on the authentication didn't match the actual signing time in the system. A small technical error, but as an engineer, I caught it immediately. "Who submitted this?" I asked. Donnelly replied quickly, "Mr. Mark Ellison. He said you gave him full authorization." I left the bank in a daze. The morning lake breeze was biting. I called Mark. He answered immediately. "Mom, what's going on? Why does the bank say I mortgaged the house?" There was a pause. Then his voice calm. "You signed it 3 weeks ago, Mom. I explained it that day. You just forgot. What right did you have to do this? You always told me to take care of things. The house will generate profit instead of sitting idle." His voice was smooth, without a hint of remorse. After hanging up, I sat looking around the kitchen. Every brick, every piece of wood Frank had installed was now just profitable capital. I opened my husband's old files. Inside was a power of attorney form he'd used when I was sick. The signature on it matched the one in the bank contract perfectly. I remembered last year when Mark borrowed these files to check assets. I had trusted him completely. Now I understood he had scanned my signature and kept it. I turned on the computer, checked my email. A strange message appeared in the sent folder. "Electronic document successfully signed with biometric code." I never created that account. It was registered with a secondary email, one Mark had used to set up my computer. Below it, an email to Carter Banks, the bank manager. "Thanks for handling it quickly. See you at Helios HQ. Sender, mark.ellison@helioscore.com." I read it over and over, each word cutting like a knife. Carter, the bank employee. Mark, my son. Two names connected to a single truth. I had been betrayed. I opened the home security camera, rewinding to the date the bank recorded the paperwork. At 8:47 p.m., Mark appeared on the back porch, using the spare key. He entered the study, paused at the safe, opened it, and took a yellow folder. As he turned, I saw the light reflect on his face, and a faint smile, as if he'd just completed a routine task. I sat still in front of the screen. All my life I thought I understood how things worked. Electricity, pressure, steel structures, but I couldn't understand my son. Frank once said, "The most dangerous thing in engineering isn't a design flaw, but when the craftsman hides it deliberately." Maybe Mark did that, except the material he tampered with wasn't steel, but his mother's trust. I turned off the computer. Outside, the lake shimmered like a cold mirror. In it, the house reflected perfectly, beautiful, sturdy, and deceitful. I knew from that moment, I hadn't just lost a house, but the son I thought I knew best. The next morning, Mark came to the house. He showed up with a bouquet of tulips and his usual smile, as if nothing had happened. "Mom, I just wanted to talk in person. You probably misunderstood yesterday." His voice was light, but his eyes weren't warm. I let him in. In the old kitchen, the smell of coffee and machine oil lingered, the scent Frank always called the smell of honest work. Mark sat in his father's chair, arms crossed, with the confidence of someone running a meeting. "Mom, the bank thing is really simple. I used the house to secure a loan. You're still the nominal owner, just temporarily." I looked him in the eye. "You forged my signature, and you call that temporary?" Mark laughed, not out of joy but disdain. "You're overreacting, Mom. You don't understand how business works. It's all for the future." I didn't say more. After years of teaching apprentices in the workshop, I knew, when a bolt is over-tightened, you can't force it loose. You wait for it to wear down. That evening, I got a text from my neighbor Eleanor. "I heard Helios Core is in trouble." "Is it true?" I saw it in the news. I opened the computer, searched for my son's company. The headline ran long. "Helios Core faces financial crisis. Founder seeks emergency funding." I looked at Mark's photo. Perfect suit, confident smile, flash reflecting in his eyes. The same smile he gave when he lied to me. I understood why he needed the house. His company was on the brink of collapse. I checked my email again. In the recent folder, I found a file named property_transfer_final.pdf. It had been opened 3 times, the last from Mark's IP address. I clicked it. It was a property transfer contract. This time, not a forgery. I had never seen this document, but under submitter, it clearly stated, Mark Ellison, authorized representative. The word authorized chilled me. I knew I had never signed any power of attorney for him. The next day, Mark came again. He brought a bag of groceries, chatting casually. "You've lost weight, Mom. I'm worried you're upset over nothing." I asked bluntly. "Nothing? Like forging documents?" He paused for a second, then laughed. "Mom, don't use such heavy words. Just trust me. Dad always wanted me to build my career, right?" The phrase, "Dad always wanted," stabbed my heart. Frank always believed in him. And now, I only saw a stranger. I replied softly, "Your father wanted you to be honest, not clever through lies." Mark didn't respond. He just sighed, put a hand on my shoulder. "Mom, sometimes you do what's necessary. I can't let everything collapse." Then he left, leaving the wilting tulips on the table. That afternoon, I went to the workshop. Frank's old blueprints were still on the table. neat lines and bold notes, now covered in dust. I touched them, feeling like I was touching memories. Suddenly, a small red light blinked from the corner of the desk, the computer's notification light. I turned it on, checked the auto-saved security footage. There, in the frame, Mark appeared again, a few days ago, when I was at the market. He opened my computer, plugged in a USB, and smiled faintly. In the final seconds, he looked straight at the camera, his eyes not fearful, but almost proud. That night, the lake wind blew hard, and rain poured. I sat by the window, street lights reflecting on the shimmering water. Frank once said, "Water holds the memory of everything reflected in it." I saw my reflection in the lake, faint and trembling, then another shadow behind me. Frank's face, gentle and sad. In that moment, I didn't know if I was imagining or truly felt him there, looking at me with the same eyes I used to look at Mark when he was small. I whispered softly, "I trusted him too much, Frank." A flash of lightning lit up, reflecting through the glass, illuminating the wall where an old photo of the three of us hung. That photo now only made me choke up. The boy in it clung tightly to his father's neck, eyes bright, smiling wide. I wondered, when did that smile die? Maybe when Mark learned to smile without feeling, just to get what he wanted. That night, I stayed in the workshop late. Each clap of thunder rattled the steel frames. I opened Frank's old notebook, the last line written in shaky handwriting. "If you lose faith in someone, let the truth do its work." I closed the book, took a deep breath. The truth was starting to surface, and I knew this storm was only just beginning. I woke up with a headache heavy as a hammer. Everything revolved around the house, the signature, and Mark's face on the computer screen. The betrayal made the air in the room thick. I brewed coffee, my hands shaking, the taste bitter. Morning light streamed through the window, reflecting off the welding table in the workshop behind the house. Frank once said, "If a structure cracks, don't try to weld it with a fresh coat of paint. Check the frame." It was time to check the entire frame of my life. I went to Nora, an old friend who used to work in cybersecurity at the machine manufacturing company I worked for. She greeted me with curious eyes. "You say the signature was forged? Let me see." I handed her the contract copy from the bank. Nora opened her laptop, zoomed in on each character, then shook her head. "It's perfect, but look at the authentication code at the bottom. It was uploaded from an IP address tied to Helios Core." I looked up. "My son's company." She nodded. "You know, no one could do this without access to the bank's authentication system. Someone on the inside helped him." On the way home, I stopped by the lake. The water was clear, reflecting my tired, aged face. In the wind, I heard Frank's voice. "Don't let anyone control your tools, even your own son." I slowly returned home, opened the file cabinet again. In an old folder, I found a photocopy of a power of attorney Frank signed when he had surgery years ago. I compared my signature there to the one in the contract, identical in every stroke. Mark had used that very sample to forge me. My heart pounded, but my mind was strangely clear. Years as an engineer taught me one principle: when a system fails, don't react with emotion. Collect data. I started acting. First, I bought a new hard drive, backing up all data from my computer, phone, and security cameras. I labeled each file like I was numbering blueprints. Then I installed 2 small cameras in the workshop and living room, one facing the backyard, where Mark had snuck in. That evening, I called Nora, asking about the person handling my bank account. "His name's Carter Banks," she said, "an internal authenticator, but I hear he's in debt." I asked, "If I have proof he helped Mark, can it hold up legally?" Nora replied, "Absolutely, but you need to be careful. If your son finds out, he'll erase every trace." I hung up, a chill running down my spine. In the dark, I realized something else. If Mark could forge a signature, he could do more. I checked my online banking account. The password no longer worked. After 3 tries, the system locked me out. In my email, an automated message: "Your login information was changed per a phone request." I checked the timestamp, 3 days ago, when Mark visited with the tulips. I remembered clearly, he went to my study to check the slow internet. I leaned back in the chair, nausea rising. Frank's voice echoed in my head, tinged with irony. "You taught him to use tools. Now he's using them against you." Tears welled up, but I swallowed them. I wouldn't let myself weaken. I opened a drawer, pulled out Frank's old technical notebook. On the last page, he wrote, "When something's stolen, turn it into a plan." I started writing, not a diary, but a plan. I noted dates, times, Mark's visits, call logs, every scrap of evidence. I saved camera videos to a memory card, labeled a 1, a 2, a 3. I relearned to see everything like an engineer, not with my heart, but my mind. Late that night, I stood at the window, watching city lights reflect on the lake. I remembered Mark as a boy, sitting with his father, assembling a small battery-powered machine. He asked, "Why do we measure every detail like this, Dad?" Frank answered, "Because one small error, and the whole system collapses." I whispered to myself, "That small error was you, Mark." The phone buzzed. A text from Mark. "Mom, I'll stop by tomorrow. Got some things to discuss." I looked at the message, strangely calm. He thought I was still the kind, trusting mother, waiting with dinner and coffee. But no, not anymore. I was awake. I knew to save what Frank left behind, I had to fight with the language my son understood. Precision. I turned off the light, stepped into the workshop. The switch clicked, white light flooding the welding table. I picked up Frank's old welding helmet, put it on, and smiled. "If you're an engineer," I whispered, "fix exactly where it's cracked." And this time, what I was fixing wasn't metal, it was the truth. The next morning, I started with the weakest link in the system. The bank. I went to the old branch where Carter Banks worked. He was about 40 in a wrinkled shirt, loose tie, and a tired face. When I walked in, he flinched, his smile crooked. "Mrs. Ellison, good to see you. How can I help?" I looked him in the eye. "Help me understand why my son could forge my signature and take my property while the bank approved it." Carter swallowed hard, his eyes darting side to side. "There must be a misunderstanding." "No misunderstanding. I cut in because I have the contract copy, IP data, and know who authenticated it. You." He froze for a few seconds, then lowered his voice. "We should talk somewhere else." I nodded. We met at a cafe by the lake. Carter sat silently, hands clasped, calculating. "Mark told me you were ill, not fully lucid. He said he was helping you manage assets to avoid legal issues." I stared at him, my gaze cold as the winter lake. "And you believed him?" Carter sighed. "I didn't, but I'm in debt. A lot. Mark promised to clear it if I processed your paperwork. He has power, you know. People like me have nothing to lose." I stayed silent. The anger in me didn't explode. It cooled, hardened like steel. "Do you have proof?" I asked. Carter hesitated, then pulled a USB from his pocket. "I kept it for protection. It has call recordings and emails from Mark. He made it clear you'd never find out." I took it, my voice steady. "Well, now I know." Carter looked down, whispering, "I'm sorry, Mrs. Ellison. I didn't think it would go this far. I just wanted out of debt." I stood up. "You'll get out, but not the way you think." That night, I opened the USB on my computer. A faint crackle, then Mark's voice. "Get it done fast, Carter. She'll never notice. She's just an old lady obsessed with her workshop. I need that money dispersed this week. Helios is dying, and I won't let it collapse." Then Carter's voice. "I need time. Authentication isn't easy." Mark scoffed. "You just make the paperwork look good. I'll handle the rest. When it's done, I guarantee you a department head position." I turned off the computer. The room was dead silent, only the wind whistling through the door. Frank once said, "Steel only hardens when heated enough." It was time to let the truth heat up. The next morning, I went to Miller, the lawyer who helped Frank draft his will. I told him everything, handed over the USB, contract copy, and camera footage. He listened quietly, his eyes growing serious. "Evelyn, this isn't just civil fraud. This is criminal. You could sue both, your son and Carter." I took a deep breath. "I don't want to sue yet. I want this handled quietly, until I'm ready." He asked, "What's your plan?" I looked out the window. "I'm going to let them bury themselves." Miller nodded, starting to back up all the data. He promised absolute confidentiality. "Before I left," he said softly, "sometimes silence is the strongest weapon." That evening, Mark called. "Mom, why were you at the bank?" Carter told me. "What are you doing?" I replied calmly. "Just checking some things." I was a bit worried. Mark laughed. Don't stress yourself out, Mom. Everything's under control. Whose control, Mark? I asked. Ours, of course. You don't want to see my company go bankrupt, do you? His voice was light but loaded with intent. I realized behind my company was a chasm. When the call ended, I knew he was worried, and I wanted him to worry more. 2 days later, Carter texted, Mark called me to Helios. He knows I kept the USB. What should I do? I replied, stay silent, and if you want peace, stand on the right side. That evening, I got an anonymous call, a hoarse male voice. Evelyn, you're playing a dangerous game. You don't know what Mark's capable of. I replied, he forgot I was an engineer. I know how to dismantle things without them exploding. The next day, a new message from Carter. Mark has started transferring money. He borrowed another $2 million in your name. Purpose investment in a solar resort. My body went numb. Resort, it sounded fancy, but it was just a way to legitimize stolen money. I asked back, has the contract been signed? Carter replied, not yet. Next week, he needs you to show up for confirmation. A plan began forming in my mind, clear and precise, like the blueprint for the air compressor I once built. I would let him think I was weak. I would let him believe he'd won. And when it was all done, I'd show him what backfire pressure really means. That night, I stood in the workshop, watching the golden light shine on the old steel plates. I held the hammer Frank used to wield, whispering, see, Frank, I still remember how to forge. The lake wind blew in, carrying a chill, and the faint clinking of metal. I gave a small smile. In that silence, I realized the most important thing. I was no longer a helpless mother. I was an engineer preparing for the final experiment, one that would reshape the truth, weld by weld. I understood that to win, sometimes you must let the enemy think you've lost. That evening, after hours of thinking, I called Mark. My voice trembled just enough for him to believe it. Son, I'm tired. Maybe I should let you take over the house, for easier management. On the other end, Mark was silent for a few seconds, then laughed. The sound that once made me proud now sent chills down my spine. I knew you'd understand, Mom. You don't need to worry anymore. I'll handle everything. I heard him exhale, relieved, like someone who'd just won a chess game. He added, I'll come by this weekend with the company lawyer to finalize the paperwork. Then you can just rest. I agreed, my voice frail. All right, son. Then I hung up, sitting still in the dark. Outside, the moonlight fell on the lake like a cold mirror. In that dim light, I saw myself more clearly than ever, a mother ready to play the victim, but holding a plan in her hands. The next morning, I went to see Miller, the lawyer. He was surprised as I explained. I'll let Mark think I agreed to the transfer. Prepare 2 contracts for me. One fake, one real. The fake one is what Mark wants. The real one is evidence of his crime. Miller looked at me, half admiring, half concerned. Evelyn, are you sure you're strong enough for this? I replied. I've welded metal at 800 degrees. A little pressure from my son won't melt me. Miller and I planned meticulously. He would contact the financial investigation agency and arrange for them to be present at the signing. I just needed to keep up the frail act, like a confused old mother. Let him think you're losing it a bit, Miller said. When people underestimate you, they reveal their weaknesses. I nodded, feeling like I was stepping into a game I'd designed myself. To bolster the act, I went to the hospital for a checkup. When the doctor asked about my memory, I deliberately mixed up a few details. The report noted, mild cognitive decline due to stress. That certificate became the perfect prop. I even accidentally left it on the table where Mark could see it. 2 days later, Mark showed up. He didn't come alone. A young woman in a black suit, the company lawyer, followed him. Mom, this is Janet. She'll help you sign faster. I gave a weak smile, my hands trembling convincingly. Thank you, dear. Mark watched me closely, then turned to Janet. My mom's a bit forgetful, so guide her to sign in the right places. Janet nodded, unsuspecting. When they left, I called Miller. He took the bait. I said, prepare phase 2. Miller laughed over the phone. A truly terrifying woman doesn't need weapons, just time. To build trust, I hired a part-time nurse, Lisa, a young woman recommended by Miller. Lisa knew her role. She'd monitor my health, but was really there to observe, record, and report Mark's every move. On her first day, Mark eyed her warily, but I feigned gratitude. "You're so thoughtful, hiring someone to care for me." He smiled. "You're getting weak, Mom. I need to know you're okay." That evening, when Lisa left, Mark stayed. He poured wine, speaking in a saccharine tone. "Mom, I know this is hard for you, but trust me. Helios will succeed. I'm doing this for our future." I looked at him, forcing tears to well up. "I know. I trust you." Inside, I heard Frank's voice, smiling sadly. "For the first time, you're lying for the right reason." When Mark went to sleep in the guest room, I stepped into the workshop. I used Lisa's phone to record our earlier conversation. Mark's voice played back in the file. "I had to do it. You don't understand. Finance or investments. That house, if not used as capital, is worthless." I saved the file, sent it to Miller with a note. First piece of the puzzle. 2 days later, Mark came to take me to sign the official papers. I wore a gray wool coat, my hands trembling, not from fear, but from adrenaline coursing through my veins. Before leaving, I left an envelope in the drawer, labeled, "If I don't return, open this." Inside were copies of the USB, contract, and recording. In the car, Mark chatted cheerfully. "You'll see, after today, everything will be better. I'll sell the lake house and invest in the resort project. We'll make history in clean energy." I smiled. "So, like your father, always believing in the future. Because Dad and I are doers, and I just weld what you break." I replied softly, making him frown briefly. The car stopped at the law office. I looked out, seeing the gleaming sign, where he thought he'd take everything. But he didn't know that upstairs, Miller and 2 investigators were ready. I stepped out, smiling the smile of an old mother seemingly resigned to her fate. But in truth, it was the smile of someone who'd just finished the final blueprint for a counterattack. The luxurious meeting room was on the 14th floor of a glass building. Everything was sleek, cold, and perfect, like Mark's smile. He pulled out a chair for me, falsely gentle. "Sit, Mom. I've got everything ready, just a few signatures." I nodded, glancing around. Long conference table, black leather chairs, projector already on. Janet, the young lawyer, placed a thick stack of documents before me. In the corner, Miller sat quietly, posing as my legal representative, his eyes subtly signaling, "Stay calm." I gave a frail smile, my hands trembling like a confused old woman's. Mark launched into his spiel. "This is the property transfer contract. After signing, you won't need to worry. I'll make sure you live comfortably for the rest of your life." I said softly, "That's kind, son. I'm tired of paperwork." Janet nodded, handing me a pen. "We just need confirmation here, and at the end." I took the pen, signing slowly, my handwriting deliberately shaky. Meanwhile, Miller tapped the table 3 times, the signal. Outside in the hallway, 2 investigators were ready. I finished signing, and Mark collected the papers, turning to Janet. "Good, it's done. Now we just need the transfer." His voice was light, like he was signing a routine deal. Miller suddenly stood. "Excuse me, before we leave, I'd like to clarify a few details." Mark frowned. "Is there a problem?" "Not exactly," Miller replied, opening his laptop and projecting onto the screen. The audio played Mark's voice. "Get it done fast, Carter. She'll never notice. I need that money dispersed this week." Mark's voice echoed in the cold room. Janet flinched, and Mark froze. I looked up at him, my voice soft as a breeze. "Remember this call, son?" Mark forced a laugh. "Mom, this is fabricated, a spliced recording." Miller responded instantly. "What about this video, then?" He clicked, and the screen switched to footage from my home camera. Mark opening the safe, taking the deed. His face was unmistakable, undeniable. "Mom," he stammered. "I was just checking the papers." "No," I said, voice steady. "You were checking my limits, and now you know." The door swung open. 2 agents from the Financial Investigation Bureau stepped in. One introduced himself, Mark Ellison, you're under arrest for financial fraud, forging signatures, and property theft. Janet paled. Mark turned to me, his voice breaking. What are you doing, Mom? You're turning me in? I looked at him, my gaze no longer angry, just deeply weary. No, I didn't turn you in. You turned yourself in with everything you did. Mark struggled as they cuffed him. You don't understand. I did it for the future. For the company, for you. I shook my head. No, Mark, you did it for greed. You forgot some things can't be taken with success. Honor, trust, and your own family. As they led him out, he looked back, voice choked. You'll regret this, Mom. You hear me? I replied softly. Maybe, but at least I regret loving you too much, not staying silent. After the door closed, Janet hurried out, face ashen. Miller walked over, placing a hand on my shoulder. It's over, Evelyn. All evidence has been sent to the court. You did the right thing. I smiled, but tears spilled over. Right is right, but why does it still hurt? Because you're a mother, Miller said, and justice always demands a price for blood ties. When everyone left, I stayed alone. The meeting room was empty, light reflecting off the glass table. In that reflection, I was no longer a frail old woman, but an engineer who'd completed the hardest project of her life, building justice. The phone buzzed. It was Carter. Mrs. Ellison. I heard. They got Mark? Yes, I replied. You should prepare to testify. If you cooperate, I'll request leniency. He sighed. I don't deserve your help. No one does, I said. We just have choices. Fix the mistake, or let it destroy us. After hanging up, I looked at the real contract Miller left on the table, stating all assets belonged to me, and all prior transfers were void. I touched the paper lightly, not out of joy, but sadness. Frank once said, justice is never clean. It leaves the stain of truth. That afternoon, I drove home. Maple Lake was calm, the sky tinged orange and gold. I stopped by the shore. Stepping out, the sunlight shimmered on the water, sparkling like molten steel. I whispered, see, Frank? I finally learned to use the fire to forge what's right. The wind blew, the lake rippling lightly, like a nod. I closed my eyes, feeling the water's chill, the warmth of victory, and the emptiness between them. When I opened my eyes, I knew one thing for certain. I'd lost my son, but I'd found myself again. The next day, the news broke. Helios Core, CEO arrested for financial fraud. Mother provides evidence. I folded the paper, not reading further. Outside, the sun rose, and in that light, I heard Frank's words echo. The truth, however painful, is the only material that never breaks. I smiled faintly, returning to the workshop. I flipped the welding switch, the blue flame flaring bright. The sizzling sound rang out, strong, certain, the sound of justice, of endings and beginnings. The lake house fell silent. No more phone calls, no footsteps, no Mark's voice echoing through the living room as before. Just the wind and the steady ticking of the clock, slow and regular like a heartbeat, learning to live again after the storm. I brewed coffee, its bitter scent filling the air. That coffee was once what I made for Mark when he visited. Now, the steam rose, dissipating into the void. I sat by the window, looking at the calm lake. Yesterday afternoon, I stood there, watching them take my son away. Police lights swept across the water, red and blue blending like an unhealed wound. That image still haunted me. Mark's head bowed, not looking back, the face of the boy who once kissed my forehead every morning, now cold as a defeated man. I felt no satisfaction. I just felt heavy. That evening, I opened the cabinet and took out the old tin box, where Frank kept the letters he wrote over our years together. At the bottom was an envelope I'd never opened. His neat, slanted handwriting read, "For Evelyn, when you trust no one." I opened it, revealing a yellowed note, his writing shaky. "If someone betrays you one day, don't let anger blind you. Let the truth do its work. I believe in you. The woman who knows how to use fire without getting burned." I smiled faintly, tears falling onto the paper's edge. Frank always understood me, even the limits I never admitted. I folded the letter, tucked it into my pocket, feeling like he was sitting beside me, nodding silently. Days later, The media buzzed with the story. Mark Ellison, once celebrated as a clean energy icon, charged with financial fraud and forgery. I turned off the TV. On the table was still the framed photo of the three of us, Frank, Mark, and me, taken the summer Mark turned 10. His smile back then was so pure it was impossible to imagine it would one day become a weapon. I couldn't erase the photo, nor could I look at it long. I just turned it face down, letting silence cover it. That afternoon, Miller came by. He brought a folder, his voice soft. The investigators confirmed, all assets are yours. The house, accounts, everything restored. I nodded, not thanking him. Justice isn't a gift, it's a duty. Miller looked at me, his voice slowing. I know you're not happy, but sometimes, the right thing doesn't come with joy. I replied softly. No one said justice had to feel good, Miller. It just has to be precise. When he left, the house fell silent again. I lit the fireplace, flames flickering, casting orange light on the walls. I opened a drawer, took out the papers Mark had signed, evidence, contracts, handwritten notes, and fed them into the fire. The paper curled, burned to ash, not to forget, but to end. As the last sheet turned to black ash, I felt my shoulders lighten. I looked outside, the sunset falling, the lake glowing golden. In the wind, I heard Frank call Evelyn. I closed my eyes, answering in my heart. I did the right thing, love. Late that night, I stepped onto the porch. The sky was calm, the lake so clear it reflected the moon. I sat in Frank's old wooden chair, my calloused hands resting on my knees. In the days ahead, I knew I'd have to learn to live again, without Mark, without anger, only with responsibility to the truth. In that quiet, I realized something strange. Silence, once my enemy, had become my refuge. No more lies, no more feigned care, just my heartbeat, slow, steady, like the rhythm of welding from the past. Before going inside, I looked at the lake one last time. The wind passed, creating faint ripples like delicate welds on steel. I whispered, Frank, the job's done. Now I can rest. The moonlight reflected on the water, shimmering like the welding flame in the night. And in that moment, I understood, sometimes, silence isn't the end. It's just the sigh of justice, having finished its work. The morning of the first court hearing, the sky was foggy. I sat on a cold wooden bench, clutching a still warm coffee cup. Maple County Courthouse was packed with reporters. They whispered, snapped photos, flashes cutting into my eyes like knives. I didn't look at anyone. I just stared ahead at the bench where Mark would appear. When police brought him in a gray prison jumpsuit, I barely recognized my son. His hair was disheveled, his face gaunt, his once proud eyes now lost. Only his hands remained clenched, as if still grasping control of the world. When our eyes met, for a brief moment, I saw 1,000 accusations, fear, and something unexpected, hatred. The trial began. The prosecutor read the charges, voice even and cold. Defendant Mark Ellison, CEO of Helios Corp., is charged with financial fraud, document forgery, identity theft, and property misappropriation. I listened to each word, my heart beating slowly. Each word was like a hammer striking metal. Identity theft, that was me. The defense lawyer stood, trying to lighten the charges. Your Honor, the defendant acted under severe financial pressure. He only wanted to protect his company, his father's spiritual legacy. His intent wasn't theft, but to sustain a dream. I listened, lips pursed. Frank had a dream of honest work, clean creation. Mark just used dream as a cloak for greed. When my turn came, the clerk called me to the witness stand. My steps were slow but steady. The room fell silent. I swore to tell the truth, then looked straight at my son. Mrs. Ellison, the judge asked, do you confirm the defendant forged your signature? I confirm, I said, my voice strangely calm. He didn't just forge my signature. He forged my trust. Mark jumped up. No, I was helping Mom. She doesn't understand. The judge banged the gavel. Order. I turned to my son. You didn't help anyone, Mark. You helped yourself. You sold my trust to buy your fear. In the gallery, a few whispered. Reporters scribbled frantically. The judge asked me to continue. I recounted every step, the bank call, sleepless nights, the USB recording, cameras, and the moment my son was caught. I spoke like an engineer presenting a blueprint. No emotion, just details, precise, cold. Each sentence was a weld. When I left the stand, Mark's eyes followed, red-rimmed. I knew he was searching for the mother from years ago, who'd protect him right or wrong, but that woman was gone. 3 days later, the jury delivered the verdict. I didn't cry or tremble. The court sentences the defendant Mark Ellison to 7 years in prison for financial fraud and document forgery. The gavel's bang was loud, final, like a hammer on steel. A proper end to the process. Reporters swarmed as I left the courthouse. Mrs. Ellison, do you regret putting your own son behind bars? I stopped, looking into the camera. If calling justice regret, then I regret, but not for turning him in, only for trusting him too long. Another reporter asked, aren't you afraid of society's judgment? I smiled softly. I was most afraid of seeing a liar continue to live under my name. Now, I'm not afraid anymore. That afternoon, I returned home, kicked off my shoes on the porch, and sat on the steps. I looked at my hands, calloused, darkened, scarred from welding, scars I once hated, but now felt grateful for. Because of them, I still knew what was real and what was fake. A week later, Miller came by. He said, Mark will be transferred to the State Central Correctional Facility. Would you like to visit? I was silent for a moment, then replied, not now. Let the steel cool first, then I'll see if it breaks or not. That night, I sat by the fireplace, its flames casting light on the old family photo. I touched Frank's face. Love, justice finally came. But why does it still feel so heavy? In my mind, I heard him answer, not in words, but in memory. Forging steel always hurts, Evie, but only through pain does it harden. I looked out at the lake. The water reflected the moonlight, calm, without ripples. I wondered if Mark regretted it or still saw himself as a victim of circumstance. But I knew guilt didn't need a confession. It revealed itself in silence. I stood, closed the window, feeling the cold night air rush in like a breath. In my mind, Frank's final words echoed, clear as a hammer's strike. Justice isn't revenge. It's when the hammer falls at the right moment, and its echo ensures no one forgets. The morning after the trial, fog blanketed Maple Lake like a thin veil over memories. I opened the window, cool mist flooding in. The house was strangely quiet. No voices, no footsteps, only the wind whistling through the iron frame Frank had welded. I stood still, feeling everything here like an aging body, beautiful, enduring, but its purpose fulfilled. I began cleaning. Every item, every small crack in the wall told a story. The hammer Frank left in the workshop, the photo of the three of us, smiling brightly on the porch, the chipped coffee cup Mark used as a child. I packed them away, not to keep, but to end. With each sealed box, I whispered, thank you for staying with me so long. In Frank's desk drawer, I found a small hard drive. When I plugged it into the computer, I saw dozens of unfinished wind turbine designs he'd been working on. His final note read, if someone continues this project, let them do it for the right reasons, not profit. I touched the screen, my heart beating slowly. Perhaps this was the last guidance Frank left behind. That afternoon, Miller came by. He looked around the cluttered house and asked, are you leaving? I nodded. I'll sell this house. Half the money will go to a fund for elderly women victimized by financial abuse, the rest to open a free trade school. He was silent, then gave a sad smile. Frank would be proud of you. I replied, no, I'm just finishing what he started. When he left, I stepped onto the porch. The afternoon light fell on the lake, reflecting on the bronze window frames. The smell of burnt iron and old wood mingled in the breeze, tugging at my heart. I remembered the first day Frank and I built this house. He held the hammer. I sawed the wood. Our hands bled, but we both laughed. We don't buy a house, he said. We build it with ourselves. Now, I was about to dismantle what we'd created. The next morning, the realtor brought the contract. Are you sure? This house's value will only rise. I smiled. I'm not selling for money. I'm selling because it's time for it to belong to someone else. As I signed, my hand trembled slightly. The blue ink spread into a faint smudge, like an uneven weld, flawed, but strong. I walked through the house one last time. In the living room, Mark's red handprint was still on the wall, the tiny hand of an 8-year-old who once mischievously smeared paint and laughed. Frank had said, "Keep it, so he knows he was here." I brushed the peeling paint, feeling like I was touching time itself. When I finished packing, I left the family photo on the table. I didn't turn it over or take it with me. They belonged here, but I didn't. I stepped onto the porch, looking at the lake, gentle waves, the sky tinged gold. I said softly, "Frank, I made it this far." A bird dove into the lake, its wings reflecting light like glowing steel. I thought Frank would like that image. A creature leaving the ground, not out of fear, but for new space to soar. That night, I lay on the bare wooden floor. No bed, no blanket. I wanted to hear the house's true sounds one last time. The creak of wood, the wind hissing through the frames, the beat of my heart in my chest. As I closed my eyes, I saw Frank by the lake, smiling, holding out his hand. "Go, Evie," he said. "The house has done its job. Now it's your turn." I opened my eyes as dawn flooded through the window. I took a small suitcase, just a few clothes, and Frank's technical notebook. Each step on the floor echoed like a hammer on steel. At the door, I paused, looking back one last time. I didn't lock it. The buyers would arrive in a few hours, and I wanted them to feel the warmth when they entered. I stepped onto the porch, breathing in the lake's breeze, cold, clean, real. In the early sunlight, the house shimmered as if gilded. I walked down the leaf-strewn path, the wind tugging at my coat. At the lake's edge, I turned back. In the water, the house's reflection was serene, no longer shadowed. I smiled. "Goodbye, Frank. Thank you for giving me a frame to forge myself again." Then I turned away. Each step from the old path felt like the final precise cut of metal. Ahead was a new road, long, empty, and truly free. 3 months after selling the lake house, I stood before a small abandoned building in the suburbs. The faded sign read, "Maple and Sons Machine Shop." I took a deep breath. The smell of rust, machine oil, and old dust mingled, the most familiar scent of my life. I stepped inside, opened all the windows, letting light flood in. In the swirling dust, I could almost see Frank smiling. "See, Evie, steel only shines when used right." I began cleaning, painting, setting up the welding table, rebuilding the frame. The shop slowly came back to life, not flashy, but solid. I hung a new sign out front, "The Forge Project, Justice Workshop." Below it, a motto I wrote, "Metal bends under heat but doesn't break. People are the same." Word of the shop spread quickly. The first few weeks, only 3 kids showed up, dropouts, children of unemployed workers. I taught them to measure, to keep the flame steady, to be patient. Their clumsy hands worried me at first, but when I saw the spark in their eyes as their first piece of steel glowed under the torch, I knew I'd chosen right. One afternoon, someone knocked. It was Carter Banks, the bank employee from before. He stepped in, avoiding my gaze. "Mrs. Ellison, I heard about your shop." I nodded, wiping my hands on my apron. "Here to learn a trade or make amends." Carter pressed his lips together. "Both. I just finished my probation, and I want to start over. My daughter, she needs to see I'm a good person." I looked at him for a moment, then handed him a hammer. "Start by fixing that door." The wind loosened the hinges. He took it, hands trembling, and nodded. I didn't forgive with words, only with opportunity. A month later, the shop had nearly 20 students. I set clear rules. No one asks about anyone's past, only what they're building. We made steel frames, fixed farm equipment, welded park benches for the town. The local paper ran a story, "Widow of Helios Case builds machine shop to train poor youth." They called me the widow who built justice. I laughed reading it, but there was a pang of bitterness. I didn't build justice. I rebuilt trust, something my own flesh and blood had warped. One evening, after the shop's lights were off, I sat alone under the faint blue welding glow. The door creaked open. It was Carter. He placed an envelope before me. My daughter Emily wants to thank you. She's been accepted to train here. I opened it, finding a child's drawing. A woman by a welding torch, surrounded by sparks like flower petals. Below, in scrawled handwriting, Miss Evelyn, you helped my dad shine again. I clutched the paper, my heart lighter. That night, as I left the shop, the wind carried the long hum of metal. I looked up at the sky, seeing stars reflected on the freshly welded steel plates. I whispered, "See, Frank, I don't need the lake house anymore. I have a place burning bright for what's right." On the first day of the training course, I stood before 25 students, mostly orphans or children of inmates. I spoke briefly. "I'm not teaching you to make steel. I'm teaching you not to break. The tools in your hands can build or destroy. The choice is yours." When I finished, the students were silent, then clapped together. In their eyes, I saw Mark, not the criminal, but the boy who once asked his father about every piece of iron. I smiled faintly, no longer angry, just feeling a void slowly filling with the sizzling sound of welding, the sound of life returning. That afternoon, as I locked up the shop, I lingered. The sunset painted the facade orange, making the words "The Forge Project" shimmer like gold. I thought of my journey, from a mother who lost everything to an engineer who built justice with her own hands, and I knew Frank was right. Steel, when forged right, doesn't break. I turned off the light, closed the door, hearing the long hum of metal, the most perfect sound an engineer's life could hold. One early winter morning, as I guided the kids in welding bicycle frames, Lisa, the shop manager, approached, holding a yellow envelope. "Mail for you, from Greenfield County Correctional." I paused, staring at it. The neat, slanted handwriting, "Mark Ellison." My heart twinged. It had been nearly 8 months since the trial, and this was his first attempt to reach out. I held the envelope for a long time before opening it. The paper inside was creased, smelling faintly of prison dampness and blue ink. The letter was long, the handwriting still bold like before. Only now, each line felt slower, like someone learning to be honest again. "Mom, I know you might not read this, but I still wanted to write. The first days in prison, I hated you. I thought you betrayed me, ruined my life. But then I realized my life was ruined long before, and I just refused to see it. Here, everything is routine. Wake up, work, eat, sleep. But you know the strangest thing? I feel calmer. No more investor calls, no more lies to keep up appearances. I'm working in the prison's machine shop. They let me weld steel frames, fix old machines, and I realized maybe I still carry a bit of dad in me. Last week, I was assigned to maintain a mini wind turbine in the prison yard. When I opened the control box, I saw the manufacturer's name, Maple Engineering. I didn't know it was your shop until Carter wrote, telling me he's working for you. I laughed when I read it, the first time in months. You turned the ashes of the past into something that runs again, not just for you but for others. You're the best engineer I've ever known. I've started redrawing Dad's turbine designs. Carter sent me some old sketches, and I'm trying to finish a version suited for prison conditions to generate clean energy for the facility. Mom, I think Dad would like that idea. I don't expect forgiveness. Forgiveness is a luxury I don't dare ask for, but I want you to know I understand. The justice you brought wasn't to punish me, but to save me from myself. Now I see what Dad meant. When steel is red hot, it's not the end. It's when it starts to be forged again. I'm being forged again, Mom. I paused, tears welling up. His voice was still strong, but no longer arrogant. I read on, Mom, if you can, give me a chance not to come back, but to contribute. I want to send you my drawings, a simple, cheap turbine model for rural areas. Carter says you could test it at the shop. If it works, I want to donate the patent to the Forge Project. It's the only way I can repay what I took. Inside the envelope was a sketch, firm, clear pencil lines. It was a small, simple, efficient wind turbine. In the corner, Mark wrote, designed for the right reasons. I folded the letter, sat in the shop's corner chair. The kids' welding machines hummed steadily, blue light flickering. I thought of Frank. He always believed Mark would carry on his dream, and maybe, through a harsh path, that was happening. That afternoon, I called Carter into the office. He looked at the envelope in my hand, silent for a moment, then said, I know Mark's changed. He works hard in the prison. They call him the rehab engineer. I asked, do you believe he can fix himself? Carter replied softly, if someone forges him like you forged me. Yes. That evening, I opened Mark's design again, photographed it, and sent it to an old engineer friend. I wrote, a wayward student is trying to find his way back. Help me test this design. After sending it, I stepped onto the porch, watching the shop's lights reflect on the water. A gentle breeze rattled the metal chimes on the door, sounding like bells. I thought of the letter, and the boy who once asked his father why steel glowed when heated. Frank had answered, because it's getting stronger. I smiled, whispering, son, maybe now I'm finally seeing that glow. The next morning, as the kids arrived, I read them part of the letter. No one spoke, until a boy named Alex, an orphan whose father died in a work accident, asked softly, Miss Evelyn, does the person who wrote that regret it? I looked at him and replied, yes, but regret isn't the end. It's the first step to rebuilding. The shop fell silent. Sunlight streamed through the window, illuminating the row of small turbines spinning slowly in the breeze. I stood, saying softly, today, we'll test this new design. It came from a place far away, where someone's learning to forge themselves again. One March morning, I got a call from Carter. His voice came through, low but relieved. Mrs. Ellison, Mark's been moved to an open correctional facility. He's allowed family visits. I was silent for a long time. Over the months, I'd read and reread his letter, memorizing every line, but facing him, the face that once broke my heart to tears, was another matter. I'll come, I said. The correctional facility was over 2 hours' drive from town. When I arrived, the midday sun glared off the steel fences. A guard led me through security to the visiting room. No glass barrier, just an old wooden table and 2 chairs. I sat, my palms ice cold. The door opened. Mark walked in. Beige prison uniform, short hair, suntanned face. He saw me, paused, then lowered his head. Mom! His voice was small, choked. I didn't think you'd come. I looked at my son for a long time. Despite the uniform, despite the remorseful eyes, I still saw glimpses of the boy who sat in the workshop, asking me how to weld without burning his hands. I said softly, I came because, for the first time, I believe you're telling the truth. We sat across from each other, between us, a silence longer than any sentence. Finally, Mark spoke. Mom, I don't expect forgiveness. I just want to thank you. In here, I've learned a lot, not about steel, but about my limits. You know, I started teaching other inmates to fix machines. They call me teacher engineer. I smiled faintly. Your father would love to hear that. Mark looked up. I think so too. Yesterday, I finished the first turbine model. They let us test it in the yard. When the blades spun, I thought of Dad, of you, of your shop, and I cried, right there in the yard. He fell silent. I heard the wind outside slipping through the bars, like the lake's breath at dawn. Mom, he continued, I regret it, not for being caught, but for making you see me like this. I looked at my son, replying softly, do you know justice isn't just punishment, but a lesson? I'm learning it every day. I nodded. Good, but I won't teach you anymore. The rest, you forge yourself. We talked more about the Forge project. I told him about the kids, Carter, Emily's drawing. Mark listened quietly, then said, I want, when I'm out, to work there. Not for you, but for people like me. I replied, if that day comes, the door's open, but not for blood, because of value. He lowered his head. You're still as tough as ever. No, Mark. I smiled faintly. I just learned to weld cold instead of hot. Still strong, but leaves fewer scars. A moment later, the guard signaled 5 minutes left. I stood. Mark stood too, trembling slightly. Mom, his voice broke. Do you ever regret it? I looked straight into my son's eyes, only for trusting you too blindly. But that regret is what woke me up. I pulled a small iron ring from my pocket, a piece of the chain Frank wore when Mark was born. Your father made this when you were born. He said, When he grows up, give it to him. If he needs to learn the weight of responsibility, I think you're ready now. Mark took it, his hands shaking. I don't know what to say. I placed my hand on his shoulder. No need to say anything. When you get out, use those hands to build, not destroy. The guard signaled time was up. I turned to leave, but at the door, Mark called out, "Mom," I stopped. "I just want you to know, I'm trying to become the man Dad was." I nodded slightly, not turning back. "Good. Start right where you're standing." Outside the facility, the wind blew strong. I stood looking at the field in the distance, where a few wind turbines spun slowly, one of them Mark's prototype, according to Carter. I smiled. The sunlight hit the blades, reflecting in glints like freshly polished metal. On the drive back, I rolled down the car window, letting the wind rush in. I thought of Frank, of his old saying, "No material stays weak forever, only material not forged right." I whispered softly, "Maybe you were right, Frank. Our son is being forged again." Back at the shop, I saw the students finishing the turbine prototype sent from the prison. Its blades spun gently in the early spring breeze. I stood watching, feeling as if I could hear Frank's old welding hum somewhere. Justice, when crafted with compassion, runs smooth as a freshly oiled machine. I smiled faintly, looking up. Sunlight filtered through the glass roof, shining on my hands, dusted with iron. I said softly, "Thank you, Frank. Thank you, our son." They both taught me that steel only shines when forged with love. A year after the prison visit, the Forge project had transformed. The small shop from before was now the region's largest trade school. The walls were freshly painted. The clear glass roof welcomed sunlight every morning. Outside, dozens of mini wind turbines spun, humming steadily, the sound of new life. On the shop's main wall, Carter hung a metal plaque engraved with "Justice isn't revenge." Its precision applied to truth. Each time I saw it, I thought of Frank. He once taught me, when welding, don't burn too long, be precise, a millimeter off, and the steel cracks. My life, too, was a weld, rough, flawed, but ultimately standing strong. That day, we held the launch for the Rebuild Lives program, a training course for former offenders. The mayor cut the ribbon, reporters interviewed, and my first students, kids once lost on the streets, alongside men fresh from prison, stood together like a sturdy steel frame. I stepped to the podium, looking out at the room. "I'm not the founder of a company," I said. "I'm just an old engineer fixing what's been broken. The forge doesn't just shape metal, it shapes people." The crowd clapped. Carter handed me an envelope. "From Mark," he said. I opened it, finding a handwritten letter and a photo. Mark standing before a large wind turbine, his face tanned but calm. "Mom, I got out early. The clean energy project in the prison worked. They call it Helios Reform. I've proposed partnering with the Forge. I'm not asking for forgiveness, just a chance to contribute. The justice you taught me isn't about revenge. It's about building from ashes." Below his signature, Mark wrote, "If you still build, let me be part of it." I read it over and over. For the first time in years, I didn't cry from pain, but from relief. Mark had truly understood. A week later, he returned. I was guiding students on welding a bike frame when I heard a soft voice behind me. "Mom." I turned. Mark stood at the door, in a gray work shirt, holding a hard hat. No more smug smile, just a humble gaze. "I'm sorry," he said. I replied, "If you want to make amends, start by oiling that welding machine. It's been squeaking for days." Mark laughed, a real, honest, simple laugh. From that day, he worked tirelessly, never mentioning the past, just quietly doing. Sometimes, I caught him reading Frank's old notebook, copying lines. One afternoon, he brought me a new design. "I improved this turbine for the rural project. I want to call it the Evie model." I chuckled. "That name sounds silly." "No, Mom," Mark said. "It's because it was made from what you taught, turning cold iron into light." The project spread across the state. The press called it the light of redemption. I didn't care for titles. Seeing the turbines spin under the sun was enough. Frank would be proud. One evening, Mark found me in the office. He placed an envelope from the National Engineering Association on the desk. They want to partner with the forge to train young engineers. What do you think? I read the letter, smiling faintly. Do you know what this means? It means more people to teach, more chances to fix mistakes, he replied. I looked at my son, seeing the lines around his eyes, marks of someone who'd learned the value of labor. I decided to start a new fund, Helios Forge Foundation, named for both father and son. Its goal: scholarships for poor kids to study mechanics. As I signed the founding papers, I thought of Frank, of the day we built our first steel beam. He'd said, "A flame only matters when it's passed on." That afternoon, the sun set behind the mountains. I stood outside, watching the turbines spin, their steel reflecting golden streaks. Mark stepped out, wiping sweat, and asked, "Mom, are you happy now?" I answered, "Not happy, Mark. At peace. Happiness comes and goes, but peace stays." He nodded, eyes misty. Dad once said, "When a machine runs smooth, every part's in its place." We stood quietly, watching the sunset. The wind blew strong, carrying the smell of oil and welding smoke, a scent I once feared would haunt me, now making me feel alive. I said softly, "Frank, do you see?" Our son learned to stand strong in the fire. Night fell, the shop's lights dimmed. I walked the hallway, hearing the hum of metal, the wind whistling through the roof. Each sound was the breath of something redeemed. I looked outside. The turbines kept spinning, reflecting silver moonlight into the sky. I closed my eyes, hearing Frank's voice in the wind. Justice doesn't destroy Evie, it forges people back into their true shape. I smiled. Perhaps, at last, all three of us, Frank, Mark, and I, had been forged anew. That morning, I woke earlier than usual. Dawn spilled through the shop's glass windows, reflecting on hundreds of steel pieces like stars lingering from the night. The air smelled of machine oil, hot metal, the scent I'd lived with for over half my life. Today was special. The Forge project turned 5, and it was the day I decided to pass the flame to the next generation. Mark stood in the yard, showing young students how to balance torque on a turbine shaft. I watched silently, not interrupting. His voice was low, patient, with no trace of arrogance. "Strength alone doesn't win," he said. "To make steel stand, it has to learn to take pressure the right way." His words made me smile. He truly grasped the craft's philosophy and life's. Carter approached, holding a stack of papers. Evelyn, the engineering board, approved the training expansion. "The forge will have 2 more branches." I nodded, lighter than ever. "Good, but after today, I won't run things anymore. I want to step back as an advisor." Carter's eyes widened. "You're retiring?" "I'm not retiring," I said. "I'm passing the flame." The ceremony was simple. No fanfare, no press, just students, teachers, and those the forge had helped. On a large banner across the shop, Carter had written, "To the woman who forged justice." I laughed. "You all act like I saved the world." Mark stepped to the podium, smiling. "You didn't save the world, Mom. You taught it how to fix itself." As the crowd quieted, Mark gave a short speech, his voice steady and firm. "My mother once said justice isn't punishment. It's daring to face your broken parts and forge them again. I know this from my own mistakes. Without her, I'd be shattered." The forge isn't just a shop, it's a place of rebirth. Today, we pledge to keep that flame burning forever. The applause lingered. I saw respect in their eyes, but what moved me most was the trust. The trust I thought I'd never see again in my son's eyes. After the ceremony, I returned alone to the old shop corner where Frank welded his first table. His hammer still hung there, slightly rusted. I touched it, hearing the faint hum of metal. In my mind, I heard his voice, low, warm, gentle as the breeze. "You kept the fire, Evie," I replied softly. "No, Frank, I just passed it on. How long it burns depends on others." As evening fell, the shop emptied. Mark brought me a small box. "Mom, I have a gift." I opened it. Inside was a copper turbine model, palm-sized, with a base engraved for Evie, the first spark. I looked at it for a long time. It's beautiful. I made it myself. The motor inside works, Mark said, smiling. Put it by a window, and the wind will keep it spinning. I placed the model on the table, the breeze from the window turning its blades, humming softly. Son, I said, when your father was alive, he said he wanted to see the wind we created. You've done that for all three of us. Mark took my hand. No, Mom, you created the wind. I just learned to guide it right. We sat together for a long time, watching the sunset gild the turbines outside. The hum of machines and laughter of students echoed faintly. A peace seeped into my veins, the kind that comes only after fighting long enough to understand silence value. That night, I wrote the final lines in my journal. The forge isn't just a shop. It's proof that people can err, but they aren't defined by mistakes. I didn't reclaim justice. I learned to live with it. The next morning, I drove to Maple Lake, where Frank and I once lived. The old house belonged to someone else now, but I stopped by the water's edge. The lake was calm, reflecting the sky like a vast mirror. I opened the turbine model's box, placing it on a rock. A gentle breeze spun its blades, humming like a human heartbeat. I said softly, Frank, see, our fire became wind. The breeze strengthened, the turbine spinning faster, reflecting sunlight in vibrant orange-gold streaks. I stood still, feeling as if Frank were beside me, his hand on my shoulder. That evening, back at the shop, I sat at my desk, admiring the second turbine model Mark made, the first I left by the lake. Outside, the real turbines kept spinning, lights glowing, and in the wind, I heard the sound I'd waited a lifetime for, the harmony of humanity and justice, of steel and compassion. Mark passed by the door, pausing. Still working, Mom? I smiled. No, just listening to the wind. What's it saying? I looked outside, where moonlight gleamed on shimmering steel. It says, justice has been forged. We looked out at the yard together. The students were still laughing, the shop's firelight reflecting into the night sky, like countless tiny stars. I knew, even if I stopped, the forge would burn forever. I said softly, like a final farewell. Frank, Mark, and all who've been broken, keep forging. Don't fear the fire. Only in fire do people shine. The shop's flames flickered, light dancing on my face. I smiled. At last, I saw the final spark, not from steel, but from the human heart. Thank you for joining me and Evelyn on this journey to reclaim justice, not with anger, but with compassion and will. Please subscribe to the channel to not miss the next stories, where every small flame can light up an entire life.